Okay, councillors, I'll declare the meeting open. I'm Darcy Byrne. I'm the Mayor of the Inner West. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land and paying my respects to their elders, both past and present. Can I ask Councillor Kiat and Councillor De Cruz, can you hear me?
Very well, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Apologies, councillors. Are there any apologies this evening? No. We'll proceed to the notice of webcasting. For the benefit of the participants in the gallery, we let you know at the start of the meeting that these proceedings are recorded for posterity and posted on YouTube for our many fans, but also so that there is a public record of the proceedings of the meeting, so your comments you make are in the public domain. I'll move on to disclosures of interest. Councillors, are there any disclosures tonight? No, very good. I'll ask everyone to please join me in a moment of quiet contemplation. Thank you. We'll move on to the confirmation of the minutes of the meetings of the 29th of June and the 6th of July. Are there any clarifications or corrections to those minutes, councillors?
Councillor Byrne?
Yes.
So on page 25 of the hard copy agenda, this is under item 7, the notice of motion mayor to stand down. There's a comment in there saying that I was in attendance for the motion of dissent, but I'd actually recused myself before that took place, and the minutes actually note that I'd recused myself at 8:15 and the motion of dissent didn't occur until 8:21. So if I can ask that the minutes be updated to reflect the fact that I was not in attendance.
That seems very reasonable. Any other corrections or clarifications?
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Stonewallis?
I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate now to ask the General Manager just to briefly inform us about any progress on the yes-no paper for the demerger, and also any other relevant facts as a very quick update to those minutes. Thanks.
Okay. I'm not sure that is in order, but it's an important issue, and there's probably not a more appropriate time on the business papers to ask for a brief update, but it can't be a prolonged item. So I'll just go to the General Manager very quickly to give an update about permanent facts and dates to the councillors about the de-amalgamation poll.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. What this afternoon in your briefing notes you would have got as one of them was an update on the poll. I'll just quickly summarise it. Council submitted the question to the Electoral Commission, who are preparing it in their format. They just get it right in the way they like to format it for their distribution. So they're doing that. As I said in the last meeting, we've engaged Morrison Lowe. They're on track so we can report back to the council meeting on the 3rd of August. The independent staff survey is closed. The results will be tabled at the 3rd of August meeting. Community perception survey will be distributed to councillors within the next week. We've been liaising with the Electoral Commission, which I mentioned this previously, in relation to the material and in the poll question and the one-page summary of advantage and disadvantage. We've engaged a copywriter separate to council staff to prepare this information, which will be based on the Morrison Lowe information. We've updated the website on the elections, and there's a section on the demerger poll. In the memo, we talk about that. We've got a flyer in the rates notice about the election. We've got a whole heap of social media to be done, and a separate flyer, which we talked about at the last meeting, going to all the households, separate to our distribution of a newsletter that happens at the end of August to the residents. And there's this whole section in the thing showing the links to the webpage and what we've updated on the website.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll need to get on with the minutes, which is what we're up to on the agenda. Are there any amendments? If not, Councillor Lockie has moved the adoption of the minutes, seconded by Councillor Kiat. Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Condolence motions, public hearing. Councillors, we've got a number of registered speakers tonight. I'll ask the minute takers to bring up the list of registered speakers on the screen. Thank you very much for that. The items for which we have registered speakers are item 3, Vietnamese Precinct, item 4, Henson Park Plan of Management, and item 5, Draft Complaints Handling Policy. I'll go to the first item, item 3, and the first registered speaker for that item is Kate Huang of Bankstown. Now, Kate, well, I'll let you and all of the other speakers know that our code of meeting practice allows for 3 minutes as a contribution from members of the public gallery. So if you could please stick to that, that would be greatly appreciated. There should be a clock on your screen that you'll be able to see as it's ticking down. Kate, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Thanks very much. Over to you.
Thank you. So first, thank you to the Inner West Council for such a great initiative about the little Vietnam. So we had a discussion about the cultural and also the political sensitivities about the project or the Vietnamese community in Australia and the current Vietnamese government, because most of us are refugees, so we don't really support the idea or anything related to the Vietnamese government, which is the communist government. And also because we received and we see the outcome of the project that was emailed to us, and in there they mentioned about the Vietnamese consulate. So we would like to get a confirmation from the council, was the project is supported or is getting any input from the Vietnamese consulate of Sydney in the project, or is that just a purely community-based project that and the outcome is based on the survey that council received from the public in general? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Kate. We'll address that when we discuss the issue. I'm pretty certain I can tell you that it's something that's been initiated by the Inner West Council, and that our consultation with the Vietnamese government is a matter of courtesy, but they're not in any way the instigators of the project. But we can address that when we discuss it. Can I ask the minute takers to bring the list of speakers back on the screen? The next speaker is An Lin Pham of Canley Heights.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is An Lin Pham, and I'm the president of the Vietnamese Women Association in New South Wales. My issue is that in the report of the precinct, the Vietnamese precinct in Mayoral, there was a mention that the consulate of Vietnam is very happy with the project and want to support the project if it is requested. And I'd like to emphasize that the Vietnamese community in Australia are refugees, and we fled the country, and we have nothing to do with the dictatorial regime in Vietnam. And we do not want any support from them, because it is like very hurting for us to have any contact with those who have harmed us and were the cause of for us to flee the country and suffered so much to come to find freedom and democracy in Australia. That's my point. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Point very well made. Thank you for coming along and for your time.
Thank you.
The next item we have is item 4, Henson Park Plan of Management. The first speaker is Stuart McCarthy of Marrickville.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to talk in support of the adoption of the Henson Park Plan of Management. Henson Park has been a sports ground and the home ground to the Newtown Jets since 1936 and even hosted events at the 1938 Empire Games. The Plan of Management and Master Plan has been prepared by Council after wide consultation. The Newtown Jets support the plan and congratulate Council on its commitment to maintain and improve this historic sports ground and at the same time provide enhanced amenity for public use. We note that the online survey undertaken as part of the community engagement process showed that the #1 reason people like to attend Henson Park is to watch organised sport. The Newtown Jets are committed to improving access to top-level rugby league for women and girls. This can only happen if appropriate facilities are provided for women. The lack of these facilities currently limits the ability to stage women's games. Newtown Jets are committed to diversity and inclusiveness, and but for COVID had planned to have a jointly promoted Pride round with the Newtown Breakaways AFL club earlier this month. Both clubs and codes intend for this to become an annual event. We've also had a team compete in the New South Wales Physical Disability Rugby League competition since 2008. Newtown and the local community have a strong affiliation to Henson Park, with many locals enjoying a day on the hill watching the game with family, friends and their dogs. One of the long-standing features of our home game experience has been to allow kids and parents to access the playing field to the ground after a halftime on game days free of charge. There seems to have been some misinformation propagated in certain quarters with regards public access to the park for general recreation being reduced or compromised by this plan of management. We refute this claim in its entirety, believing the exact opposite to be true. So in conclusion, Mr. Chair, we believe that the plan of management enhances usage of the park for all users and with some minor amendments should be adopted by Council.
Thanks very much, Stuart. That was very succinct and very well spoken. Anthony Brooks of Moore Park. Anthony, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Henson Park is an iconic sports ground with a rich sporting history, including AFL since the late 1940s, and we're committed to strengthening this through our great working relationship with the Newtown Jets. We're grateful for Council's leadership and recent investment to significantly upgrade the playing surface, include a water recycling and treatment system. The playing surface is now safe and has been built to an elite sport standard. We share Council's vision to increase girls' and women's participation in sport, and we want young girls to equally aspire playing footy at Henson Park at the highest level. It's critical that sporting facilities at all levels provide female-friendly change rooms and public amenities that encourage all communities to be active and lead a healthy lifestyle. As such, we developed draft plans in consultation with the Jets and Council that are subject to DA to ensure that in the future, female sport at all levels can be played at Henson Park. We've strongly advocated that both the federal and New South Wales governments support suburban venues such as Henson Park with funding, given the widespread community support and the significant value these venues provide to the local community. We're committed to ensuring Henson Park retains its heritage and strong identity as an iconic sports ground with its current diverse range of community users. And we're committed to supporting Council to strengthen this for future generations. In partnership with the Newtown Jets, we're also committed to support Council to ensure Henson Park's off-field amenities are inclusive, accessible, and compliant with the current BCA standards. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anthony. Our next speaker is David Clarnett of Marrickville.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is David Clarnett. I'm a third-generation resident and ratepayer. I am asking tonight for the deferment of the management plan for the Henson Park until the AFL proposed stadium is removed from the plan. I must assure you I am not anti-sports. It's through more of a lack of community consultation. Recently, we formed a group, Save the Henson Park. In the space of 4 days, we garnered 1,154 signatures asking how often the gates will be locked if the AFL build their new stadium. So far, there has been a deafening silence from Inner West Council on our request for that number of days that it will be closed. We received a pamphlet on a Friday night about community consultation. It was for a meeting that had been on the previous Wednesday, and it was for the next day, the Saturday, and it was through door knocking and collecting some dog walkers that we got some people together to meet with 2 architects who gave us some colourful stickers to put on a board and asked us about our emotions. What we wanted to know was what's happening with the park, how much will it be commercialised, and what are council's plans. We've been assured that the grandstand was not part of the plan, but it's going through tonight to be approved as a proposal, obviously not as a DA. It's important to remember that our Henson Park was once a brick pit, then a velodrome, then a footy oval, and now COVID has reimagined Henson Park not just as a footy park for a few hours a week, but an invaluable community gathering place for dog walkers, picnickers, bike riders, exercisers, and some who simply go to the park to walk around and say hi to others. If corporate sports want an oval, they can buy a development site. The Henson Park is not a development site. 7 corporate boxes with kitchen facilities are not required in our park. Neither are function rooms, nor are its office space. The George V grandstand does not require a modernist box glued to the back of it. We, the residents and ratepayers, have yet to meet with councillors and key staff at our park to ask, what are you going to do with our park? There's been much lip service, lengthy documentation. However, there has not been meaningful and engagement community consultation. The pitiful numbers on your feedback are testament to that. Stop commanding our parks. The community does not want another Adenauer Park fiasco with the gates locked 365 days a year. 1,154 is a very small number of objectors compared to the number a proper organised campaign election time can muster. The Henson Park must remain a park for our community who find sense of place on that land. And there's one last point, sorry, I'd also like to say, tonight we were expecting to have about 100 of us with our dogs outside the meeting, but obviously COVID has stopped us from having that presence. Thank you for hearing my points.
Thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you to everyone so far for sticking to time. You've been very skilled. The next speaker is Deborah Evans of Mayoral.
Hi, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I live a couple of 100 yards from Henson Park, and I have a number of concerns, and I'm asking that the decision be deferred at the moment because I don't feel that the community consultation has been adequate. I have no problem with the Jets using the park. Indeed, I take my own grandchildren to Jets games. The combination of the Jets and the AFL and the commercialisation of the park means that the other activities that I enjoy at the park may no longer be available for me. I am a dog owner and a dog walker. My grandchildren fly kites. My grandchildren use the park facilities to their fullest extent, as do many people within our community. It seems to me that Henson Park is about to be commercialised. We're about to have a huge box, I think was described as a box put on the back of the stadium. And the stadium, the stadium building, the St. George, whatever it is, and that is going to affect the heritage value of that building. We've seen what happened at Leichhardt, where an oval was commercialised. We've seen what's happened in terms of parking and in terms of people not being able to gain access to the park. At the moment, if you go to Henson Park, you will see people being COVID responsible and using Henson Park to its fullest. There are children playing on the fields, there are people walking dogs, and there are people exercising. I'm concerned that those facilities will no longer be available to our community. And those facilities are not available anywhere else in our community. So it's very important to us that Henson Park is not commercialised, that we are not locked out. A petition, I think, was something like over 1,100 people signed a petition saying they didn't want the gates locked and they didn't want people the residents excluded from the park. I don't have a problem with women and facilities for women, but I don't understand how the facilities that are being planned are around facilities for women, sports women. Those facilities are around commercialisation. They are around corporate boxes and television, and they don't have anything. They really don't have very much to do with enabling women to play sport on the park. They have an awful lot about commercialising the park facilities. And for me, that is very concerning. So I'm asking that the decision be deferred in order that the community can have further consultation with the council about what they want.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for your contribution, Deborah. And the last speaker on this item is Roger Hudson of Mayoral. Roger, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much, the council, for allowing me to speak this evening. In essence, I believe the council should not accept this recommendation to this evening tonight for three main reasons. First, I think there's been a lack of time for members of the community to respond to the final plan. We all submitted responses to the draft plan, and then we were given just 30 hours to respond to this final version of the plan. That is not an adequate amount of time. Secondly, I'm concerned about the fact that the document that was distributed yesterday was basically going to be inaccessible to many people with impaired or diminished vision like myself. I was unable to read that document. So I was unable for most of today to know whether or not what I thought would be a response to my concerns and other people's concerns were reflected in the final document. It turns out, when I get to read the documents, that in the engagement outcomes report, many of the responses, much of the content seemed to reflect the sort of attitudes that I've heard and the sort of opinions I was presenting. However, when I read the revised plan, most of those were not there. The revised plan contains very little variation from the original plan. About the only thing that seems to be greater in the revised plan is repeated referrals to having broadcast quality lights at the ground. Not much else, none of the things that were related to guaranteeing access were included in there. Yeah. And finally, I would like to make a few comments quickly on the plan itself. I think the plan fails to address a couple of really fundamental things. Firstly, it doesn't indicate how often the park is going to be closed to the local community. Currently, it's closed about 15 days a year. When the new plan comes in, is it going to be closed 15, 25, 35, 100? Who knows? It's not indicated anywhere in the plan. Next, the introduction of women's AFL. Now, I fully support the idea of opening women's AFL and endorsing it. I've gone and watched games. The women's AFL happens between March and April in the year. The plan is the park is currently closed between about March and October. So does this mean that the women's games go between about February and April? Does this mean that the park is going to be closed now between February and September each year on some days? And if so, for how many days? And finally, the plans are very vague about what's going to happen to the tennis court. There is no clear statement about whether the release is going to be renewed or what conditions there are. So I think fundamentally at the end of the day, the council has to decide, is Henson Park a sports oval or is it a public recreational space? Under the LAG, I believe it's defined as a public recreational space, that means it ought to be open to the public for as many days as possible. And the draft plan and the final plan seem to suggest that this will not be the case. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that. The last speaker tonight is on item 5, draft complaints handling policy, and that is Mr. Jonathan Bolton of Annandale.
Terrible. I should have written it before.
Sorry. I've unmuted. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors, and welcome back to the recently appointed General Manager. I addressed Council about its complaints handling policy twice in 2018 before the adoption of the current policy. What I said then is still valid. The best complaints handling policy in the world will count for nothing if the culture does not support it. A clear legislative guide for such a culture is provided by Section 8A of the Local Government Act, which requires council to be fair, ethical, and unbiased in their dealings with the community. There's judicial authority recently for the fact that council has not at all times been fair, ethical, and unbiased in its dealings with residents. And I can refer the Mayor and the General Manager to that authority upon request. Those requirements are reflected in the lofty ambitions of the current complaints handling policy, which requires that the General Manager promote a culture that values complaints and their effective resolution. That would certainly be a good start. And yet the public reporting requirement in the New South Wales Ombudsman's model policy, on which our current policy is based, is not in the policy published on Council's website. Clearly, an awareness that complaint resolution performance will be publicly reported would focus the mind of decision makers on the intended outcomes of the complaints policy. My wife and I had an extensive experience of trying to resolve a complaint with council to the point of calling upon the assistance of councillors. Even representations from more than a third of councillors left successive general managers unmoved. That would seem to be a problematic given their pivotal role in promoting the requisite culture. Recourse to the internal ombudsman was of no greater assistance, as the Ombudsman only agreed to speak to my wife and me once during the course of a 5-month investigation, after which council's submissions were taken as read. That the previous General Manager sought advice from the internal Ombudsman about the pressure being applied by councillors on our behalf should remind residents that the Ombudsman is internal, not necessarily independent. So what to do? Not only is independence of the Ombudsman important, a perception of independence equally so. In the banking industry, the concept of a customer advocate has been successfully deployed and developed in Australian banks. Ours is a culturally diverse local government area, making it even more important that residents can be provided support with their complaints, often in technically difficult areas, not merely judgment. So I think the idea that we perhaps look at the way we are dealing with complainants, the culture of the organisation, and perhaps an alternative to the Ombudsman model, which has certainly failed me and my family, needs to be considered. And I'd certainly like to feel that it's possible to contribute to consideration of those alternatives in due course if the Mayor and the General Manager are open and other councillors are open to such discussions. And that's
Mayor,
my respectful submission.
Mayor, Councillor Passes.
Yes, Councillor Passes.
I would just like to say, apologise to Mr. Bolton from myself, Councillor Julie Passes, for how you were treated, and congratulations on being vindicated. And I only wish we had more residents like you in the LGA.
Thank you, Councillor Passes.
Okay, thanks very much for that. That brings us to the conclusion of the contributions from the public forum. There are no condolence motions this evening that I'm aware of. That brings us to mayoral minutes, and I'll ask the council officers to bring those minutes on the screen. But can I ask that you start with the COVID mayoral minute rather than the one on the developer contributions. Councillors, I've tabled a motion tonight as a mayoral minute outlining the actions that council is taking. But this is the first time that we've had the councillors together as a group since the present hard lockdown ensued. So I think it would be worth taking the time to get a verbal report from the General Manager about the situation in terms of continuity of service at council and the actions that are being taken internally and externally to support our staff and the community at this time. So, Peter, could I go to you for a bit of an outline?
Thank you, Chair. So from council's perspective, the services that we continue to operate, a customer service is remaining online or by phone. The front counter's closed. The waste collection services continue as normal, and our childcare centres remain open. Essential maintenance and services required for public safety or environmental protection continue to operate, and outdoor venues, including parks and sports fields for exercise, in line with are open in line with the current public health order. You may have seen that councils that services that we've temporarily ceased. You saw an email this afternoon that we've had to, close our click and collect service just temporarily. We've had to pause all of our construction unless it's a public safety matter or we're dealing with environmental risk, and we're maintaining critical equipment such as public utilities or transport infrastructure. Our aquatic centres are closed, community sport venues, galleries, community centres, our community recycling centres, our weekend transfer station, and our Magic Yellow bus, and we're of course conducting our meetings online. We've temporarily reduced our non-essential maintenance for mowing, Virgin Park, and our council parking officers have prioritised public safety over other enforcement activities during the lockdown period. Further to that, we've been liaising closely with the Sydney Health District and the local police. And we're conducting an online forum tomorrow, information session for the community. Dr. Teresa Anderson will be presenting at that. The health responses, so are the local area commanders from the Inner West and Leichhardt, that will also be talking, as well as council staff. And we'll be giving an update on all of our agency responses. It's been a really good community response to that, because as of this morning, we took questions up until Monday, and we've got 70 questions which have been filtered to each of the agencies. So there's obviously a community appetite for that. And we're updating, and we'll be focusing everyone to our website. We've made the link to our website more prominent while we're in the current lockdown. We're trying to provide as much information as we possibly can to all of our community groups.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask through you to the General Manager a few questions?
Thanks very much, Peter. Just one moment, Councillor Passes. Councillors, I suggest that we have questions of Peter now before I speak to the motion, because I'm sure that there's lots of questions that people have. I'll go to Councillor Passes first.
Yes, through you to the General Manager, could you tell me why mowing the grass verges and street cleaning could be problematic when it's usually one or two people in different areas? Why can't that cleaning and mowing maintenance continue?
Street cleaning's continuing. It's just mowing in certain areas. We're just abiding by the public health order for these couple of weeks, Councillor Passes.
So the public health order said no mowing the grass?
Well, if it's dangerous, if it's high, if it's, providing us a safety issue, yes. We're fortunate this time of year that the grass isn't growing to a great deal, so we'll mow in certain areas where we think it's problematic. So we've temporarily reduced it. So we'll be doing it in some areas, but not of the service standard that we would normally. But our service standard's monthly at the moment, so it's we should be fine in a majority of the areas, depending how long the current lockdown restrictions.
Okay, further questions?
Councillor Byrne, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Look, it goes to the urgency motion, which councillors will have seen. It's question 2, Peter. regarding discussions between the council management and the United Services Union regarding the support offered by council to casual aquatic centre staff and indeed any other casual staff employed by council at this time. How's that going?
Yeah. Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, look, we're in discussions with the union quite regularly. We're speaking to them, if not daily, every second day. They have not raised with us an issue at this point in time in relation to the casuals. We are talking to our casuals on a regular basis. They're all eligible. A majority of them are eligible for the support, the government support that's being provided. We're making sure that we communicate that well with our staff, and we're providing assistance. So for those that are unsure, so we're pointing them in the right direction, giving it to get that financial assistance. So and a majority, it's been well talked about in the media that a majority of these people may even be better off under the government assistance that's being provided. So we will be communicating with them as much as what's out there. Of course, we'll continue to keep talking to the union, which we're doing regularly. And the other thing I think it's important to note from council's point of view, we'll re-engage the people. So those that aren't working on this assistance now, they'll be back on deck as soon as we're available to open our services again.
Thanks, Peter.
A further question, please.
Yes, Councillor Stamoulis.
A question through the chair to the General Manager. Thank you. It's been noticeable that the bins have been overflowing in many parks. I go on my walk each day, as I'm allowed to do, and I traditionally walk to several parks, and I'm noticing they're overflowing. I'm hearing this from other residents as well. Can it be prioritised that we have additional services, particularly during the COVID period, where people are using our parks, walking through them with their cup of coffee or whatever it is they're doing? Can we prioritise additional services just for these weeks while we're in COVID? Thank you.
Yeah, I have no problem with that, councillor. If it's not already happening now, we're doing it. I've just had a message from the Director of Infrastructure. We are increasing our waste pickups in parks, so we'll do that. Councillors, if you do see those, like anyone in the community, please contact us and let us know. Sometimes the eyes and ears on the ground in different areas pop up, and we'll make sure that we adjust our runs accordingly. But that service standard's been increased. While I have the floor, if I may just clarify one of the things that Kathy's just clarified with me in relation to the grass verge mowing. Where it stopped is there's certain staff that live in the LGAs that aren't allowed to come out. That's where the service standard's probably been reduced primarily from impacted staff that aren't allowed to travel. So.
Councillor Byrne, could I ask a couple of questions as well?
Yeah, Councillor Porteous.
Thank you. To the general manager through the mayor, I read in the a report, I believe, that our staff were being instructed to pass on to the police if they saw any examples of residents not undertaking social distancing in our parks. I actually thought, I was really quite concerned when I read that, because for me that steps over a line which doesn't really have the endorsement of council to do. I think while we want to work generally in line with all of the health directions, whether or not we've now decided that our staff take on a compliance role within that is something we actually haven't done before. So I wouldn't mind some comment from the general manager of this, what appears to be a pseudo compliance role that our staff are taking on. And the other question I had was about the parking arrangements. Obviously, with the high streets under extreme distress, there's very little use for a lot of people to go out and park the car on high streets and use the parking meters. So I was interested to know what the current situation is in terms of ranges and parking fines for people during the COVID lockdown.
Yeah, thanks, councillor. Yeah, in relation to the work that we're doing, it's probably the opposite of a compliance role. The work that we've done with the police, and my experience was this in my former council in the last lockdown, is they just want to know if there's areas where people are congregating too much so they're able to do the enforcement. It's just part of the arrangement we've got of working comfortably with the police to make sure that if there's something that occurs, that we do it, we pass that information on. So it's certainly not a compliance role from council staff. It's as a request to the police that we just liaise with them if we're aware that there's a spot where more people are congregating. So that's important that we do that. In relation to the range, and it's no different to what we've done in previously. And in relation to the enforcement, again, we've adopted the same approach that we had last year during this period, that we're taking, in terms of the residence parking areas, we're taking a lesser approach to that, and we're just doing the illegals, but we're still continuing to do work in the shopping centre areas just to enforce that turnover. If we don't do that, you don't get ongoing turnover, but our primary focus is on the illegals.
Sorry, could you just define illegals?
So that's when someone's parked in a no stopping zone,
Okay.
Across a driveway, those kind of things that jump out, as opposed to an overstay.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Could I just ask a question, please, Mayor?
Yes, please do.
Just in relation to General Manager through the Mayor, just in relation to the exercising, as I understand, it's just two people can exercise together. Is that what it is at the moment?
That's correct.
Correct. And so how does that relate to people who look like they're actually personal trainers or something with large amounts of equipment that look very much like they're possibly going to be dealing with more than one person at a time? So there's been no special arrangements for people like that. They're all captured in the rule, one person.
All captured in the health order. So no, there's to be no groups in this current change with the two people.
Yes,
that's to be at that level. And if we're aware of spots, that's where our rangers can do some educative role, and then
righto then.
and also if it becomes a problem, pass it on.
Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, if there's no further questions.
I just had one.
Yep, go for
it. Councillor De Cruz, it's in relation to your motion, Mayor. On point 4, what is the situation with the Summerhill Depot and Department of Health's position on that?
Yep. Thanks, Councillor. I met with the Department of Health today. They've been very, very appreciative of the relationship they've had with the Inner West Council right throughout since the pandemic started, and very supportive and very pleased with our response and the help with the Summerhill Depot. So in our discussions today, we've extended that arrangement until the end of September. It was previously going to finish at the end of June. I extended that a few weeks ago to the end of July, and we're extending that through to the end of September.
If I may ask one more question, are we being paid for that, for the use of the depot?
So I'll put that question to the General Manager.
No, we're providing it as an emergency management response.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions, councillors, at this time? No. I'll just go and speak briefly to the mayoral minute. Point 1 is to express thanks. Point 2 is to thank specifically New South Wales Health, New South Wales Police and other emergency services for their collaboration with the council staff. Point 3 is to thank the local NGOs. Point 4 is to note the extension of the availability of the Summerhill Depot until the end of September, so that the new council could review that arrangement. obviously entirely dependent upon what the situation is with the outbreak. Fifth is to seek a report at the next meeting about council's ability to provide financial assistance to community members who have lost income during the pandemic. I'll just read that one, which reads as follows: that council notes the successful City of Ryde financial assistance package for ratepayers implemented during last year's lockdown, and tables a report to the next council meeting identifying options for providing financial assistance of up to $400 to ratepayers who have lost income to assist in ameliorating the financial impacts from the present lockdown. This should include advice from the Office of Local Government on how financial assistance can be provided to ratepayers. The City of Ryde has provided that assistance in one form or another during the last lockdown. I understand they're preparing to do so again, and it may well be that other councils have provided financial assistance as well. The Office of Local Government are the regulatory arm of local government, so they should be able to tell us if and how that can be done. Six, that we write to the federal and state ministers seeking urgent expedition of the vaccination of frontline workers at council. Seven, that we ensure that tenants of council properties will not be evicted during this lockdown and that affected businesses receive a deferral of rental payments in accordance with the policy we adopted during the last lockdown. 8 is that we note a whole range of things that the council is already doing. I won't labour on these too long, but there's assistance for sports clubs, turning sporting field and court lights on at night. I'll delete the point about the library services based on the advice that we've just received, that library services are going to need to close temporarily. So if we could delete C of point 2, noting the direction that's been given to council ranges, and noting that council social media channels are available upon request to not-for-profit community organisations, etc. Now, Councillor Hesse has tabled an urgency motion, and I'd like to incorporate, I think, all of the points with one small amendment into the mayoral minute. And I'll go to him to speak to it momentarily. One of the points is in relation to casual staff. We've received a report from the General Manager that a majority of staff are actually better off on the government supplement. Councillor Hesse is proposing that we should receive a report at the next meeting. I agree on the conditions of all casuals. We do need information about that. And I think we should definitely consult with the United Services Union. I've been in touch with their executive myself over the weekend. I'm sure they'll be able to help us to devise the best support possible. So I suggest that, but I think rather than convening a meeting, that we simply bring the report back and that advice from the United Services Union be incorporated into the report. Councillor Hesse, can I go to you to speak to your proposals, just noting my willingness to incorporate them into the mayoral minute?
Thank you, Councillor Byrne, and I appreciate your offer, and it is accepted. And look, thank you also for your considerations. Some of the stuff using from last time and some new stuff, I think it's all good, and I think will demonstrate that our council is indeed supporting our community as broadly as possible. Speaking to the specific additions that I have placed there, I've been listening very closely to ABC Radio National, as I do, and many people do, and there's been some disturbing, particularly a disturbing interview this morning with the CEO of Australian Council of Social Services, Cassandra Goldie. Many people will know of her work regarding the impact on people who are in receipt of the job seeker allowance and the student allowance. Many people, indeed I've received an email from a resident who is on the student allowance, and it's student holidays at the moment, university student holidays. People like these work in the good times, and of course that ekes them through the hard times. This is usually a good time for people at university, but it's not now, and they don't get an extra cent. The resident who contacted me indicated she will be in dire straits without extra assistance. Radio National this morning had an interview with a sole parent from Penrith who gets regular casual work, that casual work has disappeared. Of course, she will not be the only one. She was talking about potentially losing her home. She pays rent on her home. So I think letting the Prime Minister and the government know that these people do need extra assistance, these are extraordinary times, and to effectively punish people in receipt of social security benefits at this time, I don't think is acceptable to most Australians, and I would hope the government will listen, not just to our voices and the voices of ACOS, but no doubt the voices of many around Australia. And that really takes us to item 10, and I note indeed that, Councillor Byrne, we could put many of the issues you have raised here. This was a strong point raised by the President of Local Government New South Wales and Australian Local Government Association, Councillor Linda Scott, that the voice of local government has been removed from these federal bodies with the essential abolition of the Council of Australian Governments and the appointment of the National Cabinet. It is really, really important at this time that the voice of local government be heard federally and with our state colleagues. We often, like the state governments, have the resources to assist, as we do with the Summerhill Depot, for example, but in many other ways, to assist our communities in their breadth and diversity to deal with this most complicated of times. And I think the voice that Linda brings on behalf of all of us could be a great assistance to get us through these difficult times. I'll leave, and I think just to end on that, I do think that keeping up to date on the issues as this affects staff, including our casual staff, is an important thing. And I hope that all councillors will support this motion as it stands. Thank you.
May I speak on that motion?
Yes, Councillor Passis.
Look, there's no doubt that people are suffering. But I live with a person that came from another country. He came here when he was 33 years old. And I am told by my husband that there is no country like Australia, how they rally around and help the people in times of crisis. The state government and the federal government are going above and beyond what is needed. And I really do feel that it's a little bit rich that a council that cannot even address its own responsibilities is telling the state and federal government what to do. Everybody is aware, we are told 24/7 in this crisis where people can go for help. You have charities, you have churches, you have government. This is not a country that lets people down. It never has and it never will. It might be all right to sit here on this council and show how concerned we are. Our businesses are held by the government. Contact Service New South Wales, it's advertised 24/7. People who are doing it hard. I don't think a landlord would be game enough to evict one person during this crisis. So it's nice to show concern. It's nice. Do you really think we are making a difference? Let's get our own house in order. Let's see that we're looking after our areas and our responsibilities. And let's leave the state and federal government to do their part, which they are doing. This all sounds good. It's leading up to an election. Local government New South Wales, I'm afraid I have no time for. They have not made one attempt to speak to the government about an election that's coming. Should this election be going on? We pay a lot of money to local government New South Wales and every other council. What are they saying about this election? How can this election go on? New candidates do not have the opportunity to campaign. You cannot speak to people. You cannot door knock. This is not an election. And silence from local government New South Wales. So please, the things that we can maybe bring up and try to do something about, let's do it. I just hate to see, you could call this a democratic election on the 4th of September.
Okay, further discussion, councillors?
Yes.
Councillor Porteous.
Yeah, look, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think that, you know, in the circumstances, we really should be turning all our parking meters off during the lockdown. As the General Manager has indicated, we're seeking to minimise the booking of people for overstaying. And I think it would be a good gesture in terms of some good news for our residents who aren't getting much good news at all at the moment. And in terms of making it a bit easier for everybody so that they're not feeling that they have to pump the meters full of money every time they have to go out, which is also hopefully not that often to do those essential things they need to do. So I'd like to move an amendment that we turn all our parking meters off during the period of the lockdown.
Thanks very much, Councillor Porteous. I'll just go to the officers for some advice on that. And can I just put it in this context? You'll recall that I proposed previously that we turn the parking meters off in side streets and get rid of the 30 and introduce 30-minute free there as well. That we turn them off after dark. Sorry. And if you recall, the community engagement was quite mixed from the residents who lived in those streets. And so I think that's just an important consideration. There's very little activity on the main street, so I don't think there's going to be a huge impact one way or the other from turning the meters off there. Can I just go to the General Manager to ask whether there's any assessment about what the impacts would be on side street parking if that were to be the case, whether that needs to be assessed and whether we could receive a report back at the next meeting on it?
Always happy to bring a report back, Chair, but I suppose it's an observation that, yes, all the meters in the side streets are there to help the residents as well with turnover, and we don't want to make their life any harder. And I'll just comment on the main streets. Everyone's entitled to a 30-minute ticket on the main streets. So if you get a ticket, you can park there, and they shouldn't be staying any longer than that anyway in visiting the area. It's important. If you do turn it off, there'll be less spots because people will just park that are working there will just park and leave their car there the whole time. So it's important that we manage that. The other consideration is we have to go and reprogram all the meters. So that means you've got to go and get the contractor out. They've got to go around and do every meter. So there's an upfront cost that would be associated with that as well. So I need to check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the way that you program. The same meters have been there for a while, so that there's an expense associated with that as well. And is there a time? I assume that would take some time as well, getting them out. That's here right. So they're not available at the moment. Yeah, so it's not as though something we can turn on tomorrow morning. No. Okay. All right. Well, I suggest, thanks very much, Councillor Porteous, for such a constructive suggestion. I suggest we add an additional point to the Mayoral minute. I'm happy to incorporate it, that we also receive a report at the next meeting on turning the parking meters off. And so that's incorporated into the Mayoral minute. Further discussion, councillors? Councillor Byrne, I think the immediacy of turning the parking meters off is the point of the action. I mean, we're in lockdown now. By the time we get a report back, we hopefully will be out of lockdown. What we want to do is do it now if we're going to do it. No, I understand, Councillor Porteous. I guess from my perspective, in regards to the Mayoral minute, we've just received advice from the General Manager that there could be implications for people who live in the side streets who will already be under stress and have raised concerns with us about turning the meters off at a different time, that the turnover on the main street could be impacted, which could affect people's ability to get into and out of chemists, GPs and supermarkets, and that it would not be able to be undertaken immediately, although I'm sure it could in the short term, by getting the contractors out there. So I'm happy to agree to incorporating the requirement for a report at the next meeting about turning the parking meters off. And we can consider the issue then again. As you know,
a mayoral minute can't be amended. So I'm seeking to be collegiate and want to get to the same objective as you, but I think we need some advice before we undertake that.
Well, I mean, all of the parking meters on the main street already have 30 minutes free.
Sorry, Councillor
So they've
Porteous.
already got the turnover issues doesn't
Sorry,
exist
Councillor
on the
Porteous.
main streets.
Sorry, Councillor Porteous, I'll just call the meeting to order. You've spoken to an amendment which you're not able to table to a mayoral minute. I've incorporated the gist of it. I get that you're not entirely satisfied with that, but there's not an opportunity for further debate on it. So I'll go to the next person who'd like to speak on the mayoral minute. There's no further discussion. I don't need to make a right of reply. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have councillors Stamoulis, De Cruz, McKenna, Hesse, Lockie, Macri, Raciti, Porteous, Drury, York, Steer, Kiat, and myself, and I wasn't able to see either Councillor Iskander or Councillor Passis. So that is carried unanimously. We'll move on to the next mayoral minute, which is in regards to the government's proposed legislation on developer contributions. Councillors will be familiar with the submission that was drafted by officers, which couldn't be reported to a council meeting in time to go off to the parliamentary inquiry. And I'm going to ask the General Manager or the appropriate officer to outline for councillors verbally the gist of that submission.
Thanks, Chair. I might throw to Harjeet. I think she is on the line. Harjeet, yep.
Yes, sorry. Through the Chair, this bill was tabled to the Parliament to adopt and look at some recent state government initiatives for the infrastructure contributions changes. The bill was a very principle-based bill. It doesn't have any details or finer grain detail of exactly what the implications will be or the methodology they're proposing in relation to some of their recommendations. And that is required to follow subsequent to the inquiry that is undertaken right now for the bill. So what council staff have undertaken in the short period that they've given us to respond is express that we need greater detail and information before any further decisions can be made on the bill, and wait for the department to release guidelines and methodology in the calculation of those of contributions and the changes to the legislation. So we've asked for further detail, and we'll wait for a response on that matter, and we can advise the councillors by a briefing note or whatever platform is suitable once we receive some feedback on that via our submission that we launched. I hope that answers the question.
Sorry, thanks very much for that, Harjeet. So councillors, the motion is simply to endorse the submission and note the concerns that have been raised. I don't need to speak to it. Does anyone wish to speak to it? No? If not, I'll put that motion. Sorry, Councillor De Cruz.
Yeah, I guess what I'm curious in this is, have we kind of developed any position on this this bill and the sorts of things we'd like to see in it? Because, I mean, most of this thing says we'd agree, but as you've said, get more detail. But are there any things that we're not supportive of? And because I presume at this early stage is a good time to have input into what's proposed or what's likely to happen. So
I'll put that question to the council officers.
Through the Chair, look, generally we have expressed that the principles are in support. There are a few principles that we are strongly opposed against, such as an example is They're seeking to amend the legislation allowing developers to pay contributions through an occupation certificate rather than paying upfront during a construction certificate after a development application has been issued. We are opposing that element because often, or sometimes what does occur is that developers can get a construction certificate, but they may not get an occupation certificate. So it's hard for councils to be able to then audit and follow through to get the relevant contributions paid at a reasonable time, a frame to be able to use those funds and so forth for the required infrastructure. So there are some elements that we aren't supporting and we're quite strongly opposed against, but generally the majority of principles that we are supporting in principle, because the principles might be sound, but we need finer grain detail to be able to delve into the detail and say, well, yes, the principle is supported, but the methodology may not be the right mechanism or the approach that's taken. So we need greater information at this point.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor De Cruz, did you have a further question?
No, thank you for that.
Okay,
Councillor
thanks.
Byrne, may I ask a question, please?
Yeah, Councillor Lockie, yes.
Through you to the relevant officers, much of the reporting around this proposed bill has focused on the concern that contributions could be raised in a particular area but be diverted into a regional fund with no guarantee that it would end up being spent in the area where the development has taken place. Is that a concern that we are raising as well within our submission?
Through the chair, we do have that as a concern. As part of the state government legislation changes, they are asking councils to be a bit more transparent and express on how that funding and so forth is being utilised in infrastructure. So there is something that we will have to report on starting from July 2022 to be able to ensure that we are spending the funding in the correct manner possible. And the thing is, it is right, the state can redirect funds to the regional infrastructure, which we do raise some objection against. But again, in terms of how much of the percentage of that contribution is and how they calculate that and what approach, it's still, we don't have that detail in front of us, unfortunately. This is where...
Okay, no, thanks. No, that's certainly the big concern I've got with the way this bill has been proposed. So I'm glad to thank you, Councillor Byrne, for bringing this motion tonight.
No problem.
Yes, Councillor Byrne, this is Councillor Steer. I've got a question along the building on what Councillor Lockie and the officer have just said. Would it be the case then that as long as Inner West Council spent the contributions within the budget year, for example, then there would be no question of it being diverted to a regional fund in the way that Councillor Lockie discussed? In other words, that's how we get to keep the money.
I'll put that question to the officers.
Through the chair, that might be a question for the finance team, but I'll do my best to be able to answer that. Each year, once we allocate the funds and spent it, then you consider reasonably that we wouldn't be able to divert it to the regional funding, but that's where we need further information of how do they go about identifying, maybe in the beginning of every financial year or beginning of a set period, they'll say, well, we need X amount of dollars to go to X amount of projects, and they earmark that, and we may have to allocate funding as per each financial year. That's just something that would seem like a logical approach, but like I said, we haven't got that detail.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Further discussion, councillors? There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. Councillor Passis is absent. In support, I have Councillors Stamoulis. Oh, Councillor Passis is back and she's got a hand raised. In addition, I have Councillors Stamoulis, De Cruz, McKenna, Hesse, Lockie, Macri, Iskander, Drury, York, Steer, Raciti, Porteous, and myself. That is unanimous. That takes us to the first item on the council officers' reports, and that is the adoption of the Inner West Council Gender Equity Strategy and Action Plan. Councillors.
May I move that, Councillor Byrne?
Yes, Councillor Lockie.
Yes, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation on this. And look, I didn't speak to this when we brought it last time because we were debating this at 10:55 p.m. But look, I'd just like to say in relation to this, I do really want to commend our staff for working in such a collaborative fashion with the peak bodies and organisations that are within the Inner West Domestic and Family Violence Working Group on this strategy and action plan. This, of course, I tabled this in response to a request from members of that group for Council to take a leadership role in developing a framework for addressing gender equity within the Inner West community as a key driver of domestic and family violence. And of course, it has much wider implications for us as noted within the report. It's very much in line with our community strategic plan in terms of creating inclusive, healthy, welcoming communities. So I certainly appreciate the work that's been put in there. One thing I will highlight as well is that it was fantastic to see people come forward during that consultation period to push Council to strengthen this strategy by recognising gender diverse people, our multicultural communities, older women, people with disability in a much more obvious way. I think that's really important for a strategy like this. I'm very much looking forward to seeing how this evolves and develops over the coming year as we develop metrics and take this forward. I'm just really pleased to see us taking such a strong leadership role in this area. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Lockie. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Councillor Steele will second the motion.
Sorry, I just didn't catch.
Councillor Steele.
All right, Councillor Steele, yep.
Yes, I'm seconding the motion. I'm speaking very briefly to this. I congratulate Council on coming up with this strategy, and I endorse the comments of Councillor Lockie in relation to it. While it will always be controversial in some respects, I think it's a great way of recognising the residents and also acknowledging that gender identity and the way we think of gender has moved on. Certainly in my generation, since the 90s, and this will be very helpful for both council planning and also to make sure that every resident is recognised appropriately. Thank you.
May I speak?
Thank you, Councillor York.
No,
Sorry, I had Councillor York, Councillor Passos. Just because you turned your microphone on doesn't mean that you were in front of her. Councillor York.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to briefly say that I'll be voting in support of the staff recommendation this evening, and it is good to see the strategy come before us. I'm also interested to see how it evolves over time. I've got to say, I think the tone of the report and the intent of it is commendable and hopefully aligned with what Councillor Lockie was hoping to see. I do think it's disappointing that we don't see in it some concrete targets. I think targets are different from metrics. Metrics is about measuring progress, and targets is about setting a clear and unambiguous goal that you want to get to, that you can measure along the way. I think it's disappointing that this strategy doesn't have that, and particularly for our own organisation, the council itself. I think that's something that is achievable. I think that's something that both Councillor McKenna and I have been pushing for in different forms throughout the last term of council, to see some concrete targets about what we'd like to see as a gender equal balance in various parts of our organisation. I have seen the back and forth over email between some councillors and staff to say that metrics will be developed over time. I think that's great. I hope the next iteration of this strategy unambiguously adopts some targets about how we'd like to see gender equality and gender balance play out within the Inner West Council.
Thanks very much, Councillor York. Councillor Passos.
Yes, first might I say This would be one of the most informative reports that I think I've ever read on this council this term. And the staff must be commended for their work. And it's good reading, and I think every councillor should read it from first page to the last. But if anybody can tell me how this report or this council can achieve what is needed in that report, I will even give it more accolades. Domestic violence and these things that are happening in our society, it's human nature, and I do not see how this council or putting up motions on these type of issues has made any changes. We had a domestic violence unit. We've never received a report back. Has domestic violence risen in the inner west? Has it declined? Do we speak to these people that are involved in it? Do we know what's happening? No. It looks good on paper. It looks terrific to put up a motion, but have we achieved anything? Are we achieving anything? As I said, maybe the motion was good for one thing, so we can get this information. But as far as this council being able to address these problems, I think not.
Further discussion, councillors?
Yes, I've got an amendment.
Yes, Councillor De Cruz.
So I've sent that to Catherine. Hope she put it up on the screen. Yeah, look, my concern is that we can have strategies and action plans, but we actually need to measure whether we're achieving what we've set out to do. And the best way to, and metrics are a really dangerous thing, because the metrics you create are what you actually adjust your behaviour to, because those become your measures. We all know how important GDP is in controlling our lives. So I think it's really important to have good measures. It's not easy to develop good measures, and I would like to see a report come back on suitable measures for this gender equity strategy. Because if we can't articulate how we're going to measure the success or failure or progress, then I think it's a bit difficult to, it's a bit pointless to actually have a strategy and claim you're actually trying to do something, because you don't actually know if you are achieving anything at all. So I would like to put forward this amendment that a report come back to the October council meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillors, further, sorry, I'll just go to Councillor Lockie and Councillor Steer. You're willing to incorporate that?
No. We've got some quite clear advice from council staff this afternoon, and notwithstanding, I do agree with Councillor York's comments that targets will be a critical part of this strategy and being able to measure. That's not what this amendment is calling for, and we had some clear advice from staff this afternoon that, this evening, that made it clear that October would be far too early for metrics to be developed, and certainly we would want to develop that in partnership with the organisations that we have been working on to develop this strategy to date as well. But Councillor Byrne, if I can perhaps go through you to the relevant officer to just summarise some of that advice that we got this evening in relation to when those measures will be coming back.
Yeah, I'll put that to the officers.
Through the chair. So the plan would be is that we would develop the performance measures as part of the new suite of integrated planning and reporting documents for the council term for 2022 to 25, and that we would build the performance measures into the delivery program and the annual operation plan, and then we'd come back to council while we're doing that and developing those so that council would approve those as part of the development of those plans. So we'd expect that that will take place commencing October of next year and will go all the way through to April. So we also do want to recognise that all of the data isn't in there, and we haven't setting the targets, and that was because we developed the strategy and the action plan because we were to bring this back to this term of council, and so we had a sort of very tight timeline in developing that work.
Thanks very much for that. Further discussion, councillors? Sorry, we've got the amendment. Is there a seconder for the amendment from Councillor Cruz?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Passos. Do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there any further debate on the amendment? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour of the De Cruz Passos amendment, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have Councillors Passos, Stamoulis, De Cruz, Steer, Rossetti, Porteous, I think that's all. All those against, please raise your hands and keep them raised. Against, I have Councillors McKenna, Lockie, Councillor Hesse. Are you for or against? Oh, you're against. Against is McKenna, Hesse, Lockie, Macri, Drury, Iskander, York. Councillor Kiat is absent. I am against. I'll just count that vote. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favour, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 against. That has been defeated. We'll go back to the primary motion. Is there any further debate?
Mayor, Councillor York's been missed on that list. She's against.
Okay, so that would be 8 against. Thank you for that. Any further debate on the primary motion? If not, I'll go to Councillor Lockie as the mover for a right of reply.
I'm fine. I'll waive.
Okay. I'll now put that. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. I believe that's unanimous. Is there anyone against? No, that has been carried. That takes us to the next item. Live music and entertainment conditions. Councillors, I'd like to propose deferral of consideration of this matter.
I second that.
To be considered when the, I'm happy if anyone's got a better juncture, but when the Enmore Road Special Entertainment Precinct report is brought back to council, perhaps this matter could be considered at the same time, which would be in the term of the new council, I think, obviously. So I won't speak to it, but I'll propose that as a way for the matter to be considered. Is there a seconder for that?
Councillor Hesse.
Yeah, Councillor Hesse will second that. Do you wish to speak to it?
Very briefly, Chair, if I can. Look, I know both you and I have had correspondence with Mr. Wardle this afternoon, and I know Mr. Wardle made it very, very clear, and I do thank the officers as well for their work. This is while the intention is clear, and I think we all share the intention of making the future of live music better and clearer and easier, particularly post-COVID. I think the drafting and the good intentions of all parties in the state parliament have been slightly made difficult, and I think it would be very useful in that discussion of the next council. And I only offer this advice; I won't be part of it. But if there could be a meeting between councillors, or a briefing, if you like, between councillors, council staff, and the relevant people from the live music industry, I think that might help deliver what's both politically acceptable but also what is legally able to be done. And I think that would be a good way forward. So I merely offer that as an extra to the discussion. But obviously, the new council will make up its own mind. But that's enough from me.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hesse. Is there any further discussion? There's no further discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour? All those against? Believe that's carried unanimously. Next item, identifying a Vietnamese precinct. Councillor Iskander, are you there? I know that Councillor
If not,
Iskander
I'm happy to move it.
No, it's okay. I've got Councillor Iskander there. I was going to him for a question. Councillor Iskander was directly involved in helping to get groups of Vietnamese citizens and civic leaders together for the council to be able to conduct the consultation on this proposal. And we had a couple of citizens attend tonight who raised concerns about the concurrence of the Vietnamese, or the support of the Vietnamese government for this proposal that has been generated from the Inner West Council. So I just wanted to go to both Councillor Iskander and to the council officers just to outline or hopefully alleviate any concerns that those speakers might have had before. Sam, can I go to you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Look, what happened is the Vietnamese community in Marrickville, they gathered and they had nearly 3 meetings. They decided the next steps after each meeting, and then it was to the staff who run the consultation, and they come with these recommendations. I think it's a very good step to take the officers' notes and take it seriously. And we start progressing that because it was a very, very big historical thing to happen in Marrickville in the Vietnamese community history. I congratulate all the people who were there, and especially my congratulations to V, who was involved from the very beginning, and she did very, very good.
Councillor Iskander, we're just we're just losing you, Councillor Iskander.
Pleasure to work with her and the others, and I'm very proud to put to the councillors. Yes, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, that's okay. We were just losing you there for a second. Okay.
I'm happy to second it, Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to ask Councillor Iskander just to step out of the meeting and come back in, hopefully with better reception. I think he was moving the motion, and I'm certainly happy to second it. I'll just go to the council officers I do want to address that concern primarily.
Mayor, we had somebody else that wanted to second that.
Sorry,
Councillor Hesse twice said he would second it.
Sorry, Councillor Passos. Despite this sometimes being your practice, interjection is not a qualification for seconding a motion.
And it's also your practice for seconding motions when other
Sorry,
councillors
Councillor Passos, I'll ask you to desist from interjecting. I respectfully ask you to desist from interjecting. I'm going to go to the council officers to ask them to identify what consultation has taken place with the Vietnamese government and what support they have provided for the project.
Through the chair, a letter was sent to the Consul General of Vietnam that was notifying them that the consultation was taking place and then asking them if they wanted to comment. This is a procedural matter and consistent with the other precinct engagements that we have done. So there's nothing out of the ordinary with that. They came back and asked questions that was, are the community being involved in the process, to which we responded yes. And then the feedback was all taken into consideration, and it just simply said that the Consul General of Vietnam was supportive of the proposal.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll just go back to Councillor Iskander if he's there now. Sam, we lost you about halfway through, so I wondered if you wanted to continue your contribution. No, we can't hear you. Okay, I'll just ask the council officers to liaise with Councillor Iskander about that technical issue. I'll speak very briefly to the motion. I want to thank the local Vietnamese community for their engagement on this. And as you can tell from the two speakers who's registered to speak tonight, when this sort of acknowledgement takes place, it can be easy to inflame cultural tensions rather than bringing people together. So it's very important that this consultation is done sensitively. I think that has been the case, as has been the case with all of the ethnic precincts that we have now renamed across this term of council. And I thank and congratulate the council officers for the way that they've undertaken this program. I think that we can say in retrospect across the 4 years that these acts of recognition have been small but meaningful and symbolic statements from the council recognising the contribution of migrants to the Inner West, the birthplace of Australian multiculturalism. And I've learned a lot from Councillor Iskander across the term in working with him about how that sort of engagement can be done well. And I think the truth is that the three former councils had very long-standing relationships with local ethnic communities that were cultivated and developed very carefully over many decades, and that it has required some work to stitch things back together after the disruption of the amalgamation. And I'm very pleased that we've taken some small but important steps to doing so. And I hope that the next term of council will be doubly committed to that, because even though the Inner West has become a less diverse place than it was in years past, we still have great importance as the heartland of a whole range of migrant communities and diasporas in Sydney and Australia. And we want to make sure that we maintain that. We want that to be central to the identity of our neighbourhoods, and for this to continue to be a place where the third, fourth, fifth and sixth generation of migrants come back to, not just in 5 or 10 years, but in 50 or 100 years. And so it's a great thing that Councillor Iskander has driven this program through the council, and I really congratulate everybody involved. This will be strongly welcomed by the businesses in Illawarra Road, as the Little Greece project has been by the businesses in Marrickville Road as well. So thanks very much. I'll now go to Councillor Hesse.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. I'm very pleased that this report has come to council, and thank all the staff. And indeed, I think Sam was trying to congratulate the work of VFAM, who is, I know well, and is a great community worker for the Vietnamese community. To address some of the concerns there by our earlier speakers, I think I would say that what we're doing here is recognising the contribution of the Vietnamese community to our community here, particularly in Marrickville. And I think that's what it's about. The broader political issues are not matters we are seeking to address, nor can we address them. This is about our community. I know when I first moved to Marrickville in 1985, it was as the Vietnamese community was, I think, in our area, really growing. And I remember being taken to have my first Vietnamese meal just as I moved here by the staff at Andrew F. Shorgie's office back in 1985. And it was a real eye-opener taste-wise, but also an introduction to the diverse community that Marrickville was then and still is to some degree. And it's something that I think that we will value down the years. And I hope that the community, that the diverse community we are, prospers, and the Vietnamese community that is so important to us continues to prosper and grow in this place of Marrickville and the Inner West generally. Thank you.
May I speak?
Councillor Passos.
Yes. from the two speakers tonight, it goes to show that this council should be very aware of things that it raises and what it does. We did not have anybody from the Vietnamese community come to council and suggest this. You've got people here, as the second speaker said, they left a terrible regime. They've come out to Australia. Of course, everyone loves their homeland, but these people are Australians. There's plenty of ways to recognise all the newcomers by showing respect, listening to them, and when they do approach us for something, that we try to deliver. We must be very careful if we don't know the background of people and what they've been through. This to me was a political exercise and one-upmanship. We did to respect all people in the municipality. They are all Australians. I will harp on the same thing again. The Carnival of Cultures embraced everyone, every culture, all our people from backgrounds, but this council seemed fit to stop it. We had people, all different backgrounds, dancing, their food, all mingling with each other at Ashfield Park, the biggest event ever held in the Inner West. But through politics, it was stopped because I started the Carnival of Cultures. People can see what's going on. People can see the politics. People can see the one-upmanship. The first thing twice the speaker has said now, when we said little Greece, little Vietnamese, was the food. These cultures have much more to offer than the food. And I hope councillors take a lesson tonight after they heard the second speaker from Vietnam and what's behind the politics and the heartbreak of leaving their country to come out to Australia. These people now are Australians. And I think we should stop reminding them where they come from when they're not real happy about where they came from.
Further discussion, councillors?
I'd like to speak if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Stamos.
Look, the one thing that I question about this report is the section on financial implications. These are coming to us with a naming proposition only, and I think that's unanimous support. I would expect that for the naming, but none of this has followed through with any budget or allocation. There's nothing there for these proposals. Now, I would assume tremendous opportunities to do some decorative elements, for instance, or work with those communities and shops in that area and communities to provide mural, possibly footpath modification, paintings or whatever they're called. Other decorative elements could be funded in some way. And I'm seeing that some of these proposals are lacking those elements, and in fact, we even state clearly in our report that there is no budget allocation for these. I would like to ask the relevant officer whether we might think about that moving in that direction sometime in the future to provide some funding, or ask the various community groups or businesses to provide some funding to maybe achieve that purpose. Is there an intent there to do that? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stamos has spoken to the item and put a question to the officers, which I'll now put to them.
Through the chair, the officers have just been implementing the resolutions of council. So if public art or additional things were required, we could come back with a report and give a price on those things.
Thanks very much for that. Further discussion, councillors? If there's no further discussion, I'll go to Councillor.
Can I speak? I don't know why you can't see me.
Sorry, Councillor De Cruz, please proceed.
Okay, I think I am a little confused what the purpose of this is, but there's a lot been said about multiculturalism, and I think it is really useful to understand that multiculturalism was something that was was brought about in the 70s in Australia. And it was where you recognise that people did have different cultures, they had different languages, and that it was okay to retain those. And I have to say, I went to university with people who'd come to Australia by boat, and they had done a tough thing, and they were at university now. But I think what we're forgetting here is the bilingual and the multi-language, because I was really impressed to be on a bus and see young kids, and they were just switching from speaking Strine to speaking Vietnamese, and I was extremely jealous, because I guess I was brought up in a generation where I cannot speak any other language, which is really disappointing. And so I think and I note from the engagement report, we had bilingual, we had interpreters, we had all kinds of stuff. But when we come to name the place, it's all in English. And so I think that's a really sad indictment, that we don't actually appreciate multilingualism. We don't actually appreciate different languages, different scripts, as in the case of Vietnam, I believe. So I just think, was there anything done about those kinds of things in the consultation? And did anything come out along those lines? Perhaps the officer could comment on that.
Through the chair, I believe that the first precinct was the Italian precinct in Norton Street, and so what was proposed then has been replicated in the council resolutions and the engagement processes since then. And so I don't believe that it has come up about things being in languages other than English off the top of my head, but I can check that. Did I answer all those questions?
Councillor De Cruz?
Well, I guess in a way that there has been no respect of multiculturalism in any of these proposals that have come to council and have been developed, that we haven't done it in a multicultural way, that we've called it Little Italy.
Sorry, Councillor De Cruz. I was just checking whether the officers were inquiring, Carolyn was inquiring as to whether you had a further question.
Sorry, I was trying to answer that I had received the answer to that. I concluded and drew conclusions on the information the officer provided of an answer to my question. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Further discussion, councillors?
Councillor Byrne.
Yes, Councillor
Henna. Look, the only concern I have about this motion is the name. And, you know, with a quarter of the people that responded unhappy with the Little Vietnam. And I just think that maybe we need to rethink that. I don't know what others think, but it seems like, and then the two speakers that spoke tonight spoke against the regime and reinforced the fact that they are refugees and they escaped what's there now. And of course, it's suggesting that maybe it could have been Little Saigon or Saigon Town, which would be before, of course, it became Ho Chi Minh City, which would have sort of had a little context with their thoughts about the current communist government. Anyway, I'm not recommending we do anything. I'm just wondering whether we should rethink it.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any further discussion, councillors? There's no further discussion. I'll go to Councillor Iskander for his right of reply. Councillor Iskander, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Yeah. Look, we started working with the Vietnamese community in Marrickville. we tried to involve the majority of the people and neighbors in community. They were very happy in the 3 meetings we had with them to name it Little Vietnam. And we wanted to name it that way because we don't want any division or sectarian or whatever, or any politics, in fact, to come to this, because we want to celebrate every Vietnamese in Marrickville and in the inner West Council. We are doing that because we respect their culture, we respect their contribution. I lived with them since they came, and we worked together. I know most of them more than 30 years. I can say I understand the concerns of some people. Everyone has the right to express their feeling, but at the end of the day, we are working for the local Vietnamese in Marrickville, and we want them to be happy of their achievement. And thank you very, very much for the staff and for the mayor who helped me in this. But more thanks to go to V, the Vietnamese worker who made things possible. At the end of it, I would like to ask all the councillors to support this, because there was very hard-working group behind this, and all of them, they supported Little Vietnam, and they wanted to go to the next step, which is to start as soon as possible celebrating the achievement. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. In support, I have councillors Stamoulis, McKenna, Hesse, De Cruz, Lockie, Macri, Drury, Raciti, Iskander, Porteous, York, Councillor Catton, Councillor Steer, are you in support? Yes?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, my hand was up.
Okay, and Councillor Passer, so is that unanimous? Is there anyone against the motion? If not, that carried. Next item. Henson Park.
Chair, can I move that?
I want to move deferral.
Chair, can I move my amendment that I've put forward?
Yes, please do.
Send it to Catherine for that. Yep, that's great. Basically, Chair, Henson Park is a fantastic community facility. But you know what? It wasn't always like that. I remember when I first got on council, Henson Park was locked up constantly and the community was locked out of the ground. And a lot of work went into actually bringing people together, hosing down fears of, you know, what sharing the facility would be like and what it would look like. And the dog walkers were very, very keen to get in there and actually share the facility, and it's worked fantastic. And it's probably a model of what we should look at all of our sporting fields, making them multi-purpose. But in saying that, 70 years ago, it was a brick pit and it was constructed for the Empire Games. It is a sporting field. The benefits that it's brought to this community was hosting the Empire Games, being the home of the Jets, and now giving us the ability to see AFL on the ground as well. I've played a lot of junior football on that ground, played plenty of grand finals on it, played for Newtown, really enjoyed my time down there. But the plan of management, and I'll just run through it in relation to what my motion is, it just relates to the park itself. In principle, it's maintaining the actual access to the community. And that is the paramount thing that can't go. That doesn't mean we shouldn't make it a little bit better. I mean, those dressing rooms, they're horrendous. I've been in them and they're very old school. Now we're expanding to a lot of women playing sport and they're not suitable. They're not suitable for the AFL teams. They're not large enough. So this is not a commitment to actually approve anything there. It is the ability to put a DA in to explore the possibility. That's all it is. Part of the amendments that I've had in here talk to the scoreboard building, and my preference is to retain the building rather than actually knock it down, for the simple reason I think it's still usable as a building and it's part of the character of the area. And I just want to go to staff because I've heard a lot of claims. I've had residents call me about this idea that there's multiple rooms for suites, for corporate suites. I don't see that in the plans. I see coaches' rooms, a broadcast room. I see a gym facility and improved change rooms and physio areas. So better facilities for our community to use and still maintaining our usage with our community. And that's why point 3 of the motion notes that the planner manager must maintain and enhance public use access to Henson Park Sports Ground. So that's enshrined in this. Now, one of the other issues is with notes that support for tree planting.
I move an extension of 2 minutes and second the motion.
Okay, Councillor Drury is seconding the motion to move an extension of time for Councillor Macri. Is there a seconder for that extension of time? Yes. Councillor McKenna will second that. All those in favour, against, declare that carried. Please proceed, Councillor Macri.
What the motion actually also says, it talks about the tree planting throughout the sports ground. Notes that the plans are indicative of proposed plantings and need to consult the AFL, Knee-Down Jets, and most importantly, the adjoining residents. I've spoken to a few adjoining residents there, and if you look at the hill where most people want to sit, trees aren't going to give you shade there because of the aspect of the sun. What it's going to do is give shade to all the residents there. And their concern is at the top of that hill, that is where the main sewer runs for their houses. Now, people might not know this, but there was a toilet up there which had to be demolished because the tree had actually gone through the whole pipes and worked its way into the toilets. We still got the tree, we demolished the toilet, that's fine. They're concerned that the right trees need to be planted in the right locations, and they're supportive of that, but they want to be consulted. So this amendment makes sure this stays in the community's hands and allows the place to be improved as a community facility. It is not going to get taken over by corporates, anything like that, and gives our women an opportunity to improve facilities, and I support that. And that's all I'll say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drury.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Vic, for moving this forward. I'd also like to acknowledge the work that the staff have done on this plan of management and acknowledge that none of these processes are perfect, and also we've had some difficult times of late. Plans of management are very major documents and very important documents because they talk about what we envisage for an area for the next decade. And I think what we have here is an envisaging of another fundamentally important sporting field that also has great capacity for community use. I think the balancing off of those two elements has been well done. And I think that the suggestions that have come from Councillor Macri in terms of some improvements vis-a-vis clarity and practicality are very welcome. I think that this is a plan of management that gives great hope for the way that we look after this really important community facility. I would seek all councillors to support this resolution.
May I speak?
And Councillor Byrne, I have a motion.
May I speak?
Yeah, Councillor Passis, then Councillor Hesse.
I would like to move that this is deferred for the new council. Now, the plan of managements, we have not adhered to one of them. Things change. Councillors are aware of the problems that we have with a lot of other parks in the area. I'm in the process now of waiting for answers back on another sporting field and the residents' concerns. With COVID now and with what we're going through, I don't think the consultation was done in the proper manner. The speakers that spoke this evening all made valid points. I really do not think, if it's been there since 1936 from a brickworks or whatever it was, a couple of more months will make any difference. I believe people really should be heard. I believe councillors, whether it's the old or new, should go out. They should have a look. We must get this right. This whole term of council has been concerns about sporting fields and surrounding residents. We are taking away open space for our residents for sport to take over. I'm not opposed to sport, but we cannot do this. We've got Ashfield Park now wanting to be reduced, putting all these extra things in. We are not the Canberra Institute of Sport. Not everybody in this LGA plays sports. We had a study, and the most activity that our residents participate in is walking. Yes, of course we have to have sport. I understand that, and I have always supported it. There's two things here. It's not really clear. Everyone has a different take on this, what is proposed. It needs to be down in black and white. Residents need the opportunity to address council. We need meetings, and they should be consulted more, not being notified yesterday afternoon. This is not good enough. When you have listened and taken on board all the residents' concern, then we can sit down and go ahead with this. This is not urgent. This is a second last meeting before the election. And I am very, very concerned about our plans of management, because I don't believe we've adhered to one, not one of them.
Okay, thanks very much. Further discussion, councillors? Oh, sorry.
Councillor Byrne, I had a...
That's right, Councillor Hesse, my mistake.
No, that's fine, Councillor Byrne, thank you. I
move deferment, Mayor. Will anybody second that?
Well, Councillor Passis, I have a motion which I hope you might agree with, and perhaps you can support that if you wish. I think perhaps listen to what I've got to say and see if you support that rather than your own. I think it goes to the same ends, and I will talk to it. It basically says that the Henson Park Plan of Management be deferred for more effective community consultation on the plan of management, including letterbox drops to all residents within a 1 kilometre radius of Henson Park, and that councillors receive a briefing prior to the plan of management being further considered by councillors. I honestly wouldn't expect that to occur prior to the next election, prior to the forthcoming election. The reason I'm proposing that is...
yes, I second that. I'll second that. Accept that. I'll withdraw my move for deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Passis.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hesse has the floor.
The residents, I think, who spoke, and indeed I don't have a problem with what was proposed this afternoon via email from the representative from the Newtown Jets. I'm entirely sympathetic to that and sympathetic to the desires of the Swans as well. But I think what we, and I thank Mr. Duck for the conversation I had with him on the phone this afternoon. It does seem like there has been a significant problem with the community consultation here. And it's, I regret to say, not the first time. I suspect it's one of the problems we've had with the amalgamation. I'm not blaming the amalgamation per se, but it's one of the things that I think could have been done a little bit better. It does seem clear that the letterbox, the idea of letterboxing residents about it was either not done or not done very well or in a timely way. Now, I think that's a problem. Clearly, this is a really important facility, and I remember, and I'll do the memory lane stuff that Councillor Macri did too. I remember moving here in 1985 and walking down Marrickville Road and seeing this green hill and thinking, great, some open space. And of course it wasn't, well, it was open, but it was behind locked gates. And I certainly remember, as Councillor Macri does, the debate we had in the earlier part of this century on Marrickville Council about the new dressing rooms. It's funny, and indeed a good thing, how time changes, because I know there was considerable debate back in 2004, 2005 about the cost of upgrading the dressing rooms at the time. It was regarded as a reckless expenditure of money by some. But I'm glad that we indeed are moving on towards looking after women sports people in our area. It's more than time, more than a decade and a half late, I think, in some respects. However, I think we do need to respect our community, the community that lives around that area in particular. And I do take it back to what we heard this afternoon, and I hear this from residents all the time. That area is loved by the residents around there as dog walking space. It's loved by the people who play tennis. I note, including our federal member who likes playing tennis down there. And of course, I do hear from the Jets and the people who play AFL as well. But that's why we've got to get it right. And I can't put my hand up in good faith this evening, knowing that a fair chunk of the community who reside in that area don't feel they've been consulted on it. And as I say, I do go back to the report, and I thank officers for the report, that the sessions on this were back in 2019. It is some time ago, and I think that a short, sharp intervention with the community to check where they're up to and to make it clear what is proposed before any development application is the way to go. Thank you.
May I speak to this amendment?
Sorry.
Quickly,
Councillor,
may I speak to this amendment?
Well, sorry, Councillor Passos, you've already spoken to your own foreshadowed motion.
No, I seconded Councillor Hesse's amendment, and I'd like to quickly speak on it.
You'd like to speak for a second time on the item, despite the fact you've accepted an amendment from Councillor Hesse.
No, will you allow it to other councillors when they speak? When they
don't think anyone could accuse me of reducing your speaking time at council meetings. But if you'd like to speak a second time on this item, very briefly,
yes,
briefly,
thank
please.
you. Well, the reason I would like to speak on it is, and I think I'm pretty sure we'll get your support on this, Mayor, because you dropped a leaflet around Asheville Park about the changes to Asheville Park. So I cannot see you vote against this when you were quite happy to put a leaflet out with your photo on it.
Sorry, Councillor Passos,
you
said you wanted to speak to for a second time to the substance of the amendment that you've accepted. You've done the opposite, so I'll ask you to desist from interjecting.
No, I'm not interjecting.
We'll go to further discussion. Sorry, Councillor Passos.
You interjected, Mayor.
No, Councillor Passos, you've spoken to the item. You've actually spoken more on this item so far than anybody else. I'll go to further speakers.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Stamos.
Look, I'd like to open up this discussion a little bit more on the community aspect. So I'd like to place a question through the chair to the relevant officer, just detailing us for the nature of the conversation, the nature of the consultation with the community, what's been done, certainly what's been done in the very recent past, and also how we could achieve better community outcomes. But if we move to deferral, how we could best achieve those community outcomes that have been, and better consultation as well. So I'll just put that question first. Thanks.
Through the chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just to give some clarity around this issue, Council undertook community engagement initially in 2019 and again earlier this year when there was a 2-month period of engagement on the draft plan of management. 1,950 residents were advised of the community consultation, and we had 800 visits to the project page for the final plan of management, and 83 submissions were received. To put this in context, the Henson Park is a shared facility. It's a shared area of open space. Dog walking is a critical element of the park, and that's acknowledged in the plan of management. One of the key issues raised was that any impact on dog walking, and that has been resolved that there will be no impact on the dog walking within the park, and we've retained the community access in terms of dog walking. Dog walking's been a feature since 2014 with off-leash exercise. In terms of the community consultation to date, it has been extensive. If we were to do additional community consultation, it would be basically putting the plan of management back out on exhibition, having another face-to-face consultation with the public and the community and asking them to make their comments again and on the proposals. There is no proposal to reduce community access to the park. In fact, the community has around 95% access to Henson Park at the present time. The sporting access, there's only 10 games presently for the Newtown Jets, and there's only been limited games for the AFL. That may change in the future, and Council will have an opportunity at that time to regulate the number of games that are played at the Oval to ensure that the community access is maintained.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That was a very thorough explanation. Councillor Stamoulis. Councillor Stamoulis, are you there? Okay, we've lost Councillor Stamoulis. I'll come back to him.
Mr. Mayor, I would still like to ask a further question if I could, and that is, hello?
Councillor Stamoulis, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
I can now, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, then briefly, just to confirm this for certainly myself and maybe other councillors, have there been any reductions in options, accessibility, and whatever other word there should be for the community? Have there been any disadvantages or reductions in their amenity? And what can you summarise any improvements that this plan might give? And I'm specifically stating for the community rather than the sports users. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor, through the chair. Obviously, we are maintaining access for the dog walking community. That's one of the priorities. We're also looking at increased turf servicing of the field to maintain, of the hill to maintain the turf surface on the hill and ensure that there is good surface for dog walkers. The plan of management also advocates tree planting, as was highlighted previously by one of the councillors. The tree planting would be subject to an agreed tree planting plan, which would go out for further community consultation and engagement and consultation with the residents and sporting users on where those trees should go. We're also talking about additional bubblers and dog water bowls within the park for the dog walkers. And in addition to that, there's also car parking upgrades planned for the park to facilitate better community use and greater access for people with disabilities.
Thank you, Aaron. Mr. Mayor, I have specifically asked about any reduction in amenity or usage or accessibility. So does the plan look at, would that reduce any accessibility or amenity for our community? Thank you.
I'll put that to the officers.
There are no plans to reduce any amenity or accessibility for the community through the chair.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion, councillors.
Could I speak, Mayor? Mayor, could I speak? Councillor
Porteous, then Councillor De Cruz.
Thanks. Look, I think it's actually really important that we defer this item. I was really concerned speaking to the residents about the consultation that has been undertaken. I can understand how the staff undertake consultation in good faith, but at the end of the day, if the communication is broken down and the residents do not feel that they've actually understood what's being proposed, and they're very concerned about their understanding about what's being proposed, then, you know, whatever way you look at it, we haven't done our job properly. And I'm quite convinced that this is the case here. And I have seen it, unfortunately, way too many times in this term of council where there may be good intentions on the part of the staff, but it's too rushed, it's too short, it's too small, the catchment area, and it's lacking in that face-to-face kind of consultation, which is so important as well, and really giving the drill down detail. I've seen it way too often as well that we just don't get the level of detail that people want to know. If you've got a beloved park which you've been using for years, which is proposed to have pretty significant changes made to it, you want to know the detail, because that's almost an extension of your own backyard in a sense. And we've always respected our residents by ensuring that they do get that level of detail so that they can truly understand what's being proposed, and they can tell us to our face, no, we don't want that. What I'm hearing is, no, we don't want that, is the prevalent message coming through at this point in time, possibly with further information being provided, with an extension to the area that's being letterboxed, and with councillors also getting a briefing, because I really don't think councillors have been given enough information either, that we could actually do a better job so that we're actually this time getting that two-way communication happening with the residents, and they are truly feeling that they are being consulted. And we have to be prepared for the fact they may not want what's being proposed either, because this is a significant development in the park. And I don't think the proposal to wait until we get a DA to see if that's a good idea or not is a valid one. No, you either want this kind of development to proceed or you don't. It doesn't matter whether it's red or blue or pinky striped. You either want it or you don't. And if we want a more low-key kind of park where there isn't this kind of development moving forward, then we need to just put it out there up front. So I think the best way to go is the foreshadowed motion of Councillor Hesse, and that's what I'll be supporting tonight.
Councillor De Cruz.
Thanks. I think I've got concerns about the scale of the proposal on this site. I have actually visited the ground through the last COVID lockdown. I did lots of walking and continue to walk, but my walking did take me as far as Henson Park, and it really struck me at Henson Park and also Pratton Oval how much the community was using the ground. There was someone on a tricycle going around and doing laps, but I think what the proposal is from the AFL and the Jets, it seems to be a corporatisation. It reminds me of David Williamson's play from the 70s, that it's taking community space, and we're so short of community open space, and privatising it and corporatising it. And we've seen at Arlington the problems it's caused with the local community. And I think at the Oval number 1 in Leichhardt, I'm not sure how much that gets used by the local community. So upgrading it to play high and elite sport is really, we really can't afford the land to do that. And I just think that the development of the grandstand, or whatever that building is behind the grandstand, is really excessive for the location and the community that it's being done in. There's no public transport. So you're going to have traffic issues. You're going to have people wanting to drive because they have to drive. They're not going to walk a kilometre from the stations. So I just don't know that this is an ideal plan for this location, leaving aside that I think there's a dramatic change in the heritage when we don't really need the kind of adaptive reuse that's being proposed. So I'm supporting a deferral for more consultation, and then the recommendation may be completely different to proceed, whether we proceed with this current plan of management or not. The community feels they haven't seen the final plan. They were consulted on something else and made feedback on that. So I think there was something else I saw where there was multiple, oh yes, on the plan, pedestrian access mobility plan, they seem to be going back out to the community and saying, this is what we heard and this is what we've done. So I don't think it's that strange to do it, to put it on exhibition again. So I'll be supporting the foreshadowed motion. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Further discussion? There's no further discussion. I'll go to the mover of the motion for a right of reply.
Thanks, Chair. Well, that was an interesting debate. I'll just address a couple of points. First of all, it's about consultation. Stage 1 of consultation had 730 people engaged. There was 190 elements of feedback. Stage 2 had 628, and it's all written in the report there, and 401 interactions, 348, and then written submissions, there was 83. So I think...
if I could just ask the speaker, who were the submissions from? Club members or residents? See, we never see this. We never see where the submissions are coming from.
Point of order, Mayor. I believe that interrupting someone mid-speech is completely unacceptable and not in accordance with the good running of the meeting. I call you to ask them, Councillor, to stay in order.
Thanks, Councillor Drury. That's correct. Councillor Passis, I'll ask you to desist from interjecting, and I'll go back to the councillor who was speaking.
Chair, and the issue of what's being built, there has to be a DA lodged. That is the proper process for a DA to be judged and assessed. And if I look at the design or the schematic that we have on page 253, you'll see it is an actual 2-storey facility behind the grandstand to respect the heritage. Across, on top of the modern building, we have coaches' viewing rooms and rooms for people to be able to actually video the games. There isn't any corporate boxes I can see there as what's being proposed. And remember, when you vote no to this, you're voting no to disabled access, to be able to access the grandstand, because that includes a lift. So you're saying no to disabled access. You're saying no to improving facilities for women in sport. You're saying no to that. I'm sorry. I've seen this council argue about petty things constantly. This has to be assessed at a DA level. The plan of management is there. We must protect the community access that is enshrined in the motion that I have moved. Enhance the public access to Henson Park. It is...
Point of order, Mayor. The Councillor Macri is misleading in his assertion that if you don't support his motion, you'd be voting against all of these items, because the foreshadowed motion is not, it's a deferral. So it's not voting against anything.
Councillor Porteous, it was a rhetorical device. I don't think there was anything dishonest or derogatory about Councillor Macri's comment. I'll ask you to desist from interjecting. Councillor Macri, please proceed.
What you need to assess in this project, are the community still going to get access? And remember, this was a sporting field which is being generously shared with the community by the sporting community. I mean, I don't understand this, and they will continue to share this field, and to create a good relationship between these two community groups, they need to work together. Now, if the budget had this many interactions, I'd be dancing. If you think this is a poor consultation, boy, how did you vote on the budget? That's what I ask you, with about 10 submissions. Holy smokes, really? I think we need to move forward to the next step so we can look and ensure. Why is it imperative now? Because the government will be putting up grants that will be available for these clubs to apply for. Of course, council won't have the money to do any of this. It'll be the ability for these clubs to go with grants to actually do this work, which will again benefit our community and not cost our community. That is the critical thing here. If the community was being disadvantaged, I'll say they're being disadvantaged, but they're not. They're being protected in this process. That's all I'll say, because the grandstand, the land behind the grandstand is a hole in the ground, and the roof on top of the actual building they currently use is just a roof where the community can't go. So there's no real loss of actual quality space on the hill or around the ground at all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. I'll now put the motion, the Macri jury motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands and keep them raised. In support, I have councillors. So just to clarify for everybody, I'm putting the primary motion moved by Councillor Macri, seconded by Councillor Drury. In support, I have councillors McKenna, Macri, Drury, Iskander, Stamoulis, York, Rossetti, and myself. All those against, please raise your hands and keep them raised. Against, we have councillors Passos, De Cruz, Hesse, Lockie, Porteous, Kiat, and Steer. I think that has been carried. I'll just count that. In favour, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 votes, and against I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That has been carried. We'll move on to the next item. Councillor Macri, if you could take over the chairing, that would be great.
Okay. Thanks, Chair. Item 5, councillors.
Can I move this one?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Sorry, that was Councillor De Cruz, was it?
That's correct. Sorry, I'm on 2 devices.
Yep.
Yes, I think we should endorse this draft policy for exhibition. I'd like to thank the officers for another good report. Some very illuminating data that's been provided and some beautiful graphs. It's really useful. I'd also like to thank the speaker who came tonight and made a very salient point that all the beautifully drafted policies in the world are naught if we don't implement them. And that's the other thing, that we've actually got to come up with an effective, transparent and robust complaint handling system. And I look forward to the feedback from the community, and depending on the feedback from the community, I expect that we'll be in consultation with both the Office of Local Government and New South Wales Ombudsman to come up with the best possible complaints handling policy that we could implement here in here in the Inner West Council.
Mayor, can I
this to other councillors to support to go on exhibition? Thank you.
Can I second it, please, Mayor?
Yes, Councillor McKenna. It's just.
Oh, sorry.
Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, further discussion.
Yes, is a seconder going to speak?
Councillor Stamoulis, did you want to speak?
To seek deferral of this until the new council. I think that there have been issues of significant concern about complaints handling, but there's certainly been very divided opinion about the model that council uses for the in terms of the Ombudsman. There's the internal service, and there's the one used by the vast majority of councils in Australia. That's the external service. We're one of only a tiny number that use the internal service. I do think that this has been a very contentious issue. on our council. And it's one, I suppose, that goes to the heart of culture of our council. And I think it would be best if this particular council, with our ups and downs and turmoil, probably doesn't give this particular policy to the future new council. I think we should leave it to them to make their decisions on these activities, complaints handling, the Ombudsman service, and I suppose the rights of our public and the rights of our councillors too. We've seen those trodden on over the term of this council, but also the rights of our residents. So I would hope that councillors would feel comfortable and confident to be able to hand this particular decision. I don't think we're in a position to claim any self-righteousness or any positivity in regards to this policy, and I think we should hand it over to the new council to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Further speakers?
Speak, please, Mayor. It's a second.
Get on.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I second Councillor Stamola's move for deferral.
Okay, I just got to hear from Councillor McKenna because she was a seconder.
Thank
you.
No, Councillor McKenna was a seconder on the original motion.
Correct. She wants to speak. Can you let us
Okay.
speak? Thank you. Councillor McKenna, please.
I would endorse this going out on public exhibition. This will be coming back to the new council for adoption. We're not adopting this policy tonight. We're just sending it on public exhibition. This is a good opportunity for the community to have a good look at this policy and bring it back to the new council. So this council is not going to be adopting it. It has a lot of changes in it from the last policy. I think they're all really worthwhile. As Councillor De Cruz says, lots and lots of information, and of course the implementation of this and the education that goes around this will be the really important things, and that's something for the next term. But I think we should. It's in line with the New South Wales Ombudsman's effective complaint handling guidelines of 2017, and I do think that it looks to me like an excellent policy, and I think the structure we have is right, and I think the argument that we did hear from the speaker earlier today in the community consultation period was that we pay for this, so it's not independent. Well, of course, nothing's independent if you look at it that way. ICAC is paid for by the New South Wales government, but it is independent, as are all of those bodies. So it is perfectly okay that we have an independent ombudsman who only looks at those areas where people are not satisfied from the job that council has done. So I fully support this policy going out. Thank you.
Okay. Further speak.
Yes, I would like to speak.
Yes, Councillor Passos, please.
I support the deferral as this report's been given to us as we have an internal ombudsman at the moment. It does not work when a council investigates itself. There are too many incidents and there is too much evidence that it is not working. It has not worked. You cannot have, it's like the police investigating the police. There must be a better way. Even the older way that we had previously was better. It went outside. When you have the general manager that makes the last decision on whether a complaint goes to full investigation or not, how can that be independent? When you have the internal ombudsman being paid for by the council, the general manager is her boss. How can that be independent? This cannot be open, transparent, and done in the proper manner. And how can the residents have faith in this policy? It just cannot work. And I have to disagree at the last speaker saying that it's only going out to consultation. We're not voting on it. As the paperwork says and as the report says, the people have to address what's in this, what we're consulting them on. And what we're consulting them on is not right. We cannot have this. It does not include public reporting, a requirement contained in the Ombudsman's policy. We've never got anything coming back to council on outcomes of complaints. In the 4 years, I haven't seen one sanction. I have residents telling me they lodged complaints and they never heard back. It was up to the general manager to decide whether the complaint was going to be investigated or not. How can this be open and transparent? It's not. This cannot go out as it is. That's why I believe we wait for the new council and we seek advice. I move to have the Ombudsman removed from council, a great cost to our ratepayers. And people have said about me, I must have something to hide. I think I'd be the only councillor that everything I've done is all out there in public. I have nothing to hide. But if things are going to be done and we are going to have the faith of our residents in this council, this type of complaint handling system we have is just not right. It cannot continue.
Thank you, Councillor Passos. Any further speakers? There's no further speakers. I might just say a couple of words. I'm a little bit torn with this because I'm not a big fan of the internal ombudsman at all. In all my time on Mayoral Council, we didn't have one. I didn't see the need for one. And I'm still not convinced we need one. I am concerned some of the things that Councillor Passos has said about the independence, how it looks when it's really internal rather than external. So for that reason, I'll support the foreshadow motion. So I'll just put my case forward there, but allow the mover of the motion to close. Councillor De Cruz, did you want to close?
Yeah, look, I'm a fan of actually putting stuff out on exhibition and getting the feedback from the community. And I guess the only way we are going to do that is by putting this document on exhibition and hearing what the community has to say about it, because we're not going to get to a point where and if I think that I agree that there's problems with the shared service. I have always disagreed with the term internal ombudsman, and right from when I first joined was first elected, that I've incessantly probably remarked that it's the internal, not the independent ombudsman. But I do think that we do need a complaints handling process, a process where issues can be resolved, where because we're all not infallible. We're all human. We're working with a very diverse community, and we actually need procedures that can do that. Now, I think we can talk about whether we continue with the shared service or not. But I don't think we actually have had a report come back about the shared service in particular. I think if people have commented on the fact that the community be very restricted on what it can comment on and what it can't comment on, I don't think that the internal ombudsman shared service is particularly is actually required for the code of conduct or for the effective complaints, and that's what we should decide at when after we've done the community consultation and understood all the issues our community is facing in dealing with the council and getting a resolution of any complaints. I mean, if you look at the graph, there's currently, I don't know, huge amounts, 56% are basically not resolved, either the service failure or the complaint wasn't handled properly. So I think we do need to look at, and we can't invent our own complaints process. We have to look to the New South Wales Ombudsman for guidance, and they have advice from all the different councils, and one hopes comes up with best practice. And we also have to seek advice from the Office of Local Government. So, I mean, look, I really think we should put this on exhibition and get the feedback from the community. That's my view. And I hope all the councillors support that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Okay, all those in favour of the motion by Councillor De Cruz, seconded by Councillor McKenna, raise your hands, please. Councillor Hesse, Councillor Jury, Councillor Lockie, Councillor Skander, Councillor Kiat, Councillor Steer, Councillor Porteous, Councillor Rosidi. I can't see your hands, so I'll say no. Councillor York. Okay, so those against, I'd say it's myself, Councillor Rosidi, Councillor Rastamolis, passes. Okay, I'll declare that carried. Go to item 6.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, I want to move item 6 with an amendment which I have circulated.
Okay, yes, you could note the updates designed of parts. Yes.
Yes,
Is that your amendment up there on the screen, Councillor Steer?
I can't see it on the screen, so I can't tell you.
Here it
Yes, it is. Yes. The first point should be point 1, and then my amendment is points 2 and 3.
Okay. That council note the updates on the design and delivery of the public toilets for Camperdown Park. That council notes that construction has been delayed since the original motion approved on the 11th December 2018. Council notes the commitment of council to construct a public toilet in Camperdown Mayoral Park in the financial year 2022. Yep. Okay, is there a seconder for that? I'll second it.
Second it.
Seconded by Councillor Macri. Okay. All right. Any discussion?
Yes, I just want to speak briefly to this, and I thank you, Deputy Mayor, for seconding this motion. I have, as you know, on a number of occasions pointed out that this construction has taken too long. The council has explained to some extent the reasons for this, and which mainly relate to the failure of the architect to come up with a design for the budget. However, I do note that council staff did not come back and ask us for more money or explain to us what was happening until I started making some motions about this. It's been 2.5 years since the original motion, and all that time the money has been allocated every year and apparently not spent. I have asked in the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee of the appropriate staff, has that money been allocated? And I have been assured that it has been. However, we've been able to build every other kind of project that we've come up with, which is fantastic, but building a toilet block seems to be beyond the powers of council. And this is of great concern. So what I'm hoping for with this motion is to really ensure that the toilet block actually does get built within the next 12 months. I don't think that's too big of an ask, and that that in the next term, other councillors, I will leave it up to them to monitor the progress and to ask for updates and for explanations from council staff if there are any further delays. But I'm hoping that by putting this motion with the amendments that I've noted in it today, that we will be able to get a proper design that meets the needs of the residents who use Camperdown Memorial Rest Park on a daily and weekly basis. It's one of the most popular parks in the whole area, and eventually get some public toilets before Newtown Festival reconvenes. We don't know if we're going to have a Newtown Festival this year, and that we certainly won't get a toilet block this year. But for Newtown Festival 2022, it would be really nice to have a proper toilet block installed. So let's get the show on the road, and I hope everybody votes for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Any further speakers on this? If there's no further speakers.
Yes, I'd like to speak.
Councillor Passis, yes?
Well, it took me 4 years to get Ashfield toilets at the station. So I think if this gets done this year or early next year, it'll be fantastic. And I think there is over 100 and maybe more resolutions that haven't been addressed in this term on council, and no reason. All you see alongside them is pending, pending, pending. We seem to have all our time seems to be on sporting venues, renaming suburbs, and basic things like water and toilets is last on our agenda. I will, may I say to Councillor Steer, you don't have to be on council to follow up to make sure they're done. You're a ratepayer, you can follow up yourself.
Thank you, Councillor Passis. Any further speakers? If there's none, I'll offer a close for Councillor Steer if she wants, or we can just vote on it.
Councillor Macri, I'm happy for you to speak on it if you wish.
I'm always supportive of public toilets. That was one of the things I did when I was mayor. I put in a public toilet strategy. Everyone thought it was funny, but until you get caught out and you need one. So happy for build facilities. I think that's what we're here for. Thank you. All right, all those in favour? Aye. Lift your hand. Do I see anyone voting against this? I can't see anyone voting against it. Declare it unanimous. Okay, lovely. Item 7, local traffic committee meeting. I'll move it. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
I don't know who that was. Everyone came at once.
De Cruz.
De Cruz, Councillor De Cruz, second. We don't need to speak on it. Happy to just move it and put a vote to it. Yeah, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Declare that unanimous.
I'll move the next report, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Molis. Item 8. Yep. I'll second it to speed things up. Did you want to speak to it, John?
No, thank you.
Do we need any comment on it? No? I'll put the vote. All those in favour? Those against? No dissenters. I'll call it unanimous. And I believe that's the end of the meeting, people, at 9:14. Excellent. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. You did well.
Mate.
Good night, everyone. Have a good night.
Cheers. Bye.